Hello again, and welcome back to the video series called Minds on Guard, where we're taking a deeper dive into the concept of media, all of the ways that we interact with it, the ways that it manifests in our lives, the subtle and not so subtle ways that it's used to manipulate us, control our thoughts, and via some outcroppings, our actual behavior patterns as well. In the last few videos, we've been taking a look at a news article from Fortune magazine about an upcoming food shortage and some ways that the United States can handle it. And we noticed some things that, where language is being used pretty subtly to, affect our emotions and get us thinking from our emotions. And yeah, just some really troubling things. It was pretty much a surface level dive. And we're going to get into some more material like that in the future. In this video, we're going to take a little bit of a turn and start to talk about some questions that we want to start asking. We'll get into a little bit of historical stuff, also some psychological, conceptual material. I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to get right into it, and we're just going to start asking some questions. In an earlier video, I asked the question, how well do you think you understand the world around you? Now take some time and sit with this and ask yourself some secondary questions. What types of media do you interact with during a given day? How long do you spend in these information exchanges? What sorts of information do you typically take in, and in what ways is it being presented? Why do you gravitate toward a specific type of media and information exchange? Does any of this questioning have an effect on your mood or cause you to feel in any way uncomfortable? Our emotions, as we saw in the last article dissection, are incredibly important and crucial to understand and really maintain our awareness over if we're going to deal with media in an honest and integral way. The answers to these questions, they should be personal, and my hope in asking them is to get some thoughts moving about how and why we think in the ways that we do. For myself, I spend a great deal of my day taking in information from social media and through general internet activity. News sites, online information sharing communities such as Locals, Instagram, and YouTube are my main avenues, and each one provides a different set of information from which I gain my general understanding about the world as it is during any given day. Those sites and resources, along with audiobooks and various podcasts, and there's really not much of my day that's lived independently of my interactions with some form of information exchange. Now, why am I using that term, information exchange? Recall that information is the primary way that we communicate, the sharing of it back and forth. So to be clear, I am referring to this as an exchange because while I receive information from the sources that I'm interacting with, I'm also communicating information back to them and others in various ways. I hope to go into all the ways that our data is shared across like big tech platforms and various media resources, and I want to have a much deeper discussion on that topic. But for now, it'll serve our purposes here to recognize that information is always flowing in both and often many other directions during any of our interactions with any source of media that we may be engaging with. Now, this is a truth about the state of the technological integration into every area of our daily life. Our connection to the technology involved in communication has developed to such a deep degree that severing the link between our thoughts and the devices can, for some, feel as though a piece of their physical body has been removed. In many cases, people cannot psychologically cope with being separated from the technology that allows them to have uninhibited access to their hyper-focused, hyperactive, and hyper-interactive information exchanges. We all likely know someone who seems utterly glued to their phone 24 hours of every day. You may even be that person. I know that I will occasionally get a blast of anxiety when I feel like I can't have access to my phone for one reason or another. Over time I've become more and more aware of this compulsion, and I'm not ruled by it in the same ways that I once was. But the draw was very real for me. It had a type of hold on me that felt very similar to a drug addiction. This is, of course, by design, and the designers of these various media information exchanges, the apps we use, Facebook, Twitter, all of those, they have a very deliberate interface. And, this is a theme that I want to be revisiting often. And the design of those apps and those sources works to perfection to achieve its aims of maximizing viewership and engagement. I asked earlier about the effect that the questions that I was posing had on your mood. It's important to examine this issue often, because it will help to expose areas where we're allowing outside control over our critical thinking capacities. In a prior video, I spoke briefly about thinking from an emotionally affected state. This is a very important thing to keep our minds wrapped around and focused on while we go through all of these dissections. There are many reasons for why we might fall into these states. However, I would like to begin to shift gears a bit to address some of the historical developments that really do need to be understood if we're to truly come to terms as to why the mechanisms of control are in place, and what they're there to accomplish, and who they're meant to serve. There was a woman who did an extraordinary amount of research and work to expose some very serious and long-established corruption of the education system of the United States. Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt wrote and compiled a massive amount of information into a book titled The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. She also ran a website of the same name dedicated to the work of talking about and exposing the directed actions of powerful people to impose a system of thought control on the population of America. Now, she passed away in February of 2022, and I believe her work is some of the most important there is regarding the topic of systemic thought and behavioral manipulation that has been forced onto generations of Americans, really the world, since the early part of the 20th century, and it has continued until today. Mrs. Iserbyt's work is integral to gaining an understanding of what we're discussing with respect to how and why we have such a massive critical thinking problem in our society. In her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down, she outlines a coordinated and focused plan to shape and mold the minds of America's youth over generations. This was to be done through the education system, and by shifting its core operation from that of a classical, thinking to gain understanding based style of learning to one that was founded on principles of reward and punishment centered, outcomes based training and memorization. The foundations of this outcomes based training has its roots in Europe via the Prussian model of education, where the individual thinking capacity of every child in the system is forsaken in favor of the interests of the collective unit. It was developed in the mid-1700s in Prussia, which would be considered present-day Germany, and it was the first instance of what could be understood as a compulsory period of education in any student's life that was funded by the state, thus allowing for, quote, free education of all its nation's children. This established a centralized curriculum that would serve the interests of the state. The model was developed through the 1800s and ultimately was a major contributing factor to the rise of National Socialism in the early 1900s in Germany. I want to explore some of the reasons as to why this happened, and to begin, we need to look at a man named Wilhelm Wundt. Remember his name because we're going to dig into him and his work in future videos, and we'll be camping in this area for a little while. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope the questions that I asked at the beginning are thought-provoking and that you sit with them for a little while and maybe write some things down, take some notes, really dig in and think about the psychological aspects of information exchange, what it means to be in that mode of exchange. And then, yeah, I hope that you check out Charlotte Iserbyt's website. Just look up The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America and explore that website a little bit and maybe get your feet wet with some of the material that's there. We'll be digging into a lot of the underpinning and sort of the nitty-gritty that's contained in that book in upcoming videos. Until the next video, I hope you all are well, I hope you stay safe, and I hope you stay diligent and vigilant with your minds on guard.